ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm talking to the one and only Whitey, UK coach extraordinaire, and now the head coach for ENCE Academy. So, Whitey, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great, apart from it being, nearly 37 degrees today in the UK. Absolutely sweltering in the room, but no, we're good. We're in a happy place. Enjoying CS recently, with the team. But yeah, it's just too hot, man. Just way too hot.
Yeah, I agree. The heat here is just absurd. We're not used to this. We're not built for this, but,
No, definitely not built for it, that's for sure.
We will endure. ENCE Academy, kind of like a crazy new direction for you as a coach, isn't it? Because you spent most of your career, if not all of it, in the UK scene, right?
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying, I think I started out in the UK scene originally as a player, got up to a decent level, I'd say, in the UK, started to become more known, went to a couple of lands playing, really enjoyed it. And then built up connections, from there, met some amazing people that got me into areas that I could never have imagined. After speaking to those good connections within the UK scene, I realised that with my sporting background, coaching football and stuff like that, and coaching kids on the weekend, that I think I would have more of a chance in esports as a coach than I would a player. Mm-hmm. And then obviously with the connections I originally built from the first few lands I went to, I got the chance to be a coach in the professional, my first professional contract. And then, from there, it just went on. It went crazy, traveled to loads of tournaments, built up as a coach. I started off and I didn't rate myself whatsoever, because coaching football to coaching CS is totally different, right? Of course, you have those coaching tendencies that can help teams and solve issues within a team. But when it comes to the tactical side and analytical type of side of the game, it's totally different. So, I spent a good 2 years, maybe 3 years, building up my coaching abilities. But it's always been in UK teams. Of course, I've been in the main endpoint team when we had Impulse and AVN, which was two Serbian players. So I did get a little bit of a European sort of vibe from the players and learned a lot from those two guys, which was amazing. But now going on to where I am now with the ENCE Academy, obviously coming from Endpoint Academy, I originally started that program just from an idea being, just sitting there brainstorming when I was out of esports, really. And went through that, pitched the idea to Endpoint, so on and so forth. A year later, obviously it didn't go down as well as I wanted it to. It was still an amazing experience, but in the end, I think my friend, Neil M, tagged me in the tweet for the ENCE, Academy open application thing. Read through it and it said, only apply if you can speak English and Finnish. But I thought I'd apply anyway, shoot my shot, and from there went through all the stages and here we are now. It's crazy to me. It's really crazy to me to see that I've made it this far.
Mm-hmm. You touched on Endpoint Academy a bit earlier. It's something I wanted to bring up. Mm-hmm. Means you have experience building an academy, but now obviously you probably have a few more resources than you did with Endpoint. With that first experience, what are you looking to do differently, perhaps, going into ENCE Academy?
Endpoint were amazing. Like with what resources we had, and when I pitched it to them, they were honestly amazing. So I can't fault anything they did. Of course, with the whole COVID situation as well, we was let down by the fact that we couldn't go to boot camp with the team, which was, it was the only bad thing, the fact that I didn't actually get to meet the team in person. But again, it's not their fault, and with COVID and how the world was, you can't expect those things to happen when something like that happens in the world. But going on to your real question, I learned a lot, even in the initial stage process, the way I review players, the way I judge players. I totally changed everything I did, bringing it into this ENCE Academy program. And with that knowledge and that learning curve for me, I think it's made me, I wouldn't say no one's perfect, right? But it's made me be able to build the best team of my ability and learning, understanding of CS. And I think I've done a good job with this roster. But I think that learning curve from Endpoint Academy has pushed me so much further for this program, which is great, of course.
I also wanted to touch on the Finnish scene itself. I mean, obviously it's very different to the UK scene, and the UK scene has its own challenges. But I think across the board, when you look at the Finnish scene and even the sub-top teams beyond, like Havu and ENCE back in the day, a lot of the players are older. Was it very difficult finding young up-and-coming players for an academy team?
You know what? It was harder within the UK to find younger sort of players, but in Finland, I got help with Emily Woomera, who is obviously the lead program guy. Great guy, by the way. Honestly, love working with him every day. And you should definitely take an interview with him. I'll try and arrange that because he's a great guy. But yeah, he set up like a player sort of HQ, you know, of all Finnish players. Because he's got a good knowledge of Finnish players, like I do with UK players, and he set that up for me, and it was so much easier for me to understand who's where and who's who. Obviously, I knew some of the players anyway from being within, you know, Counter-Strike, and I was so surprised. Genuinely, I'm not even just saying it because I'm representing, you know, one of the biggest Finnish esports organisations. I was genuinely surprised with how good the scene is. It's crazy. The scene is so talented, and throughout the tryout process that we had with all of these Finnish players, obviously you can only, you know, bring so many forward, right? And only 5 get into the team. But it was insane. It was so close. Some of the scores that I had with some of the players was honestly remarkable. And the ages were, you know, they varied from 16, 15, all the way up to 20 odd, you know. And yeah, man, the scene's very talented. And I'm surprised that there's not more core Finnish teams that are out there, if you know what I mean. And again, I know it's easier said than done, right? You can't just build a team and get there. It's a long process. You need some backing and stuff like that. But I'm very surprised because after reviewing loads of those players and even watching some demos of players that were sent to me, I was so surprised. And it's not even just me just saying it. I was very impressed with the players that came across, and hopefully I get to, you know, see more of them in teams in the future, because some of them guys that are teamless and not in a team genuinely get themselves out there more. And I wish I could help all of them, you know, but I'm only one man and I've got to deal with my team. But you know.
What was this trialing process like? So you mentioned like bringing in a bunch of players. Was it just like, you know, 20 people doing sort of 10-mans and stuff like that? What was the process like, and over what period?
So we had obviously we've got a partner program with eSportal, like eSportal FI. Sorry, they set up a couple of like prospect cups and stuff like that. This is why you should speak to Woomera, because he fully understands obviously that that behind the program and stuff like that. But yeah, we had a partnership with them, and we had a couple of like cups that were set along, which had like invitations to the summer event and stuff like that. This was before I just joined. Right. I actually played in one of them, which was funnily enough, but it didn't go down too well. But yeah, so they happened before I joined. A couple of the guys made it through to the summer event, which then led into another thing. But again, I won't comment too much because I was obviously explaining this, but I was reviewing players where some of them were happening when I first joined. Woomera would be the best person to speak to about that. But yeah, with that program, they were setting up basically like, not gathers, I'd say 5v5s, but it was 10 players, and the teams were set out by Woomera and the admins of eSportal. And then obviously we had those streamed by Natu. And then we could watch those games and find out who's going to be in a prospect group, who's going to be in like a tryout group and stuff like that. And that's how Woomera kind of found his balance between the two. And then obviously I had the list from the get-go, who was playing in what, who's not even playing in any of them, who's in, you know, other teams, you know. Right. Even Miltsy, for example, he was in Enterprise, so he wasn't really competing, but he was on the list. So yeah, basically what we did as you know, from our behalf, me and Woomera spoke, and we said from the first couple of weeks, it will be initially 5-man Finnish tryouts. And what we'd do is we'd have, you know, whether we played 3 or 4 games a day, it would be 3 of the games in Finnish communication and 1 of the games in English. Now, the reason I did this is because the whole plan from the get-go was, if we was to build a Finnish core team, I would want them to communicate in Finnish because they'd be playing at their best of their ability, and competitive wise it was key, right? But at the same time, we're here to build players not only just for results, we're here to build players for their future and to mold them into a promising player to be able to join any sort of European core roster and be able to communicate in English to the best of their ability. Okay. Right. So in the tryouts, we did 3 tryout games in Finnish, 1 in English, and basically the way I scored those games, we'd arrange practices from all levels. We'd get a practice game versus a team that wasn't as experienced, and a team versus that was experienced, and then I would score those players under KPIs, key performance indicators, which would vary across the board: aim, control, decisions, sometimes communication as well for the English game, because I couldn't understand what they were saying in Finnish, obviously. And then we had 2 weeks of Finnish tryouts, I think it was. We then went on to European tryouts for like a week and a half, and then we had another week, just under 2 weeks, where we mixed Finnish and European players together to see how that worked.
Okay.
And in the end, obviously, we came up with the decision to go with the 5 Finnish roster, and I think it was the best for the organization. I think it was best for the community, and I think it was best for me, because the way I saw this 5 play together was, I wouldn't say it was the best of ability, and there was beating everyone. There's nothing to do with that.
Right.
It just worked. I done in my article for ENCE when they done the announcement. I think I just wrote as simple as it worked. When you just get the feeling of something working, it just worked. It clicked. Personalities clicked. In game, there was no bad environment. It was all chill, and everyone was open to criticism. I could talk to them very easily. Their communication in English was great. And in the end, like I said, the tryout process was very tricky, but we worked very well together, me and Woomera, and we found out the best idea possible, and that was just to go with like 3 games in Finnish, 1 game in English, and then start off with the Finnish tryouts and then end with the European, and then mixed it. Sorry, that answer was so long. I was trying to roll back the weeks of what was happening. It's like long gone now, but I'm trying to remember what we actually did. I'm just so focused on the team now. But sorry about that.
No worries. Did you feel very early on that you knew who would kind of make the final cut, or like maybe the top 10 candidates, something like that, or did a lot of people surprise you throughout the process?
You know what? From the get-go, I always say to people, I never say these people are going to make it to the end. I never say that, because in Counter-Strike, you can be the best player in the world, right? Or you could be the best player, upcoming player. You could be the best player that's known by your friends or in certain groups. Right. But if you've got the wrong attitude, or you've got the wrong personality for CS, you're not going to make it far, and you're not going to make it to a team, right? And I've seen that across UK, I've seen that across many countries, and players that I've trolled from different areas. And I don't think there was any clear-cut player that was going to make it. I was very impressed, and of course, when I saw some players play, I was like, Jesus, this is going to be such a tricky decision. Every day it got harder and harder for me to go, right, who's going to make it now, and who's going to get to this sort of next stage, or get down to like the final 10 or whatever. And I think I definitely had, in my eyes, I wouldn't say favorites, but I'd say I definitely had people that I was drawn to by their personality. I was like, right, this guy is such a bubbly person. He could do well on a team. But I never ever make a decision until it's really down to the last crunch time. Very up until their last game or tryout day. That's when I make my decision if they're going to make next stage. But man, I was so impressed. Like, it was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make in my esports career. Genuinely, even when I quit, like. I can't even remember. I think it was in 2020. I quit for a few months, because I didn't know what I wanted to do anymore. That was one of the hardest decisions. ENCE Academy was tricky, but this one was insane. It was so hard. And when I care a lot about players, right? And when you have to tout an aspiring, hungry young player that wants to become a pro one day, who's 16, maybe 19, whatever age they are, you turn around and tell them you've not made it. It's it's not a nice feeling. It's really not, because if I could take them all, I would.
So you touched on Milty a little bit before. He's probably, I guess, to the wider public, somebody who's the most recognizable on this roster, maybe Henu. But Milty was playing as the Opper for a while on Enterprise, if I'm not mistaken, and now he's coming in as a rifler, right? And Pody is picking up the Op. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So how does that kind of all work out? Because I personally have seen Milty play, and I thought he was great as a rifler, and I wasn't so sure about the opping, but seeing him move back to that role is great. But how do you kind of adjust that in this roster? Is there maybe a bit of hesitation with Pody picking up the op if he doesn't have experience on it?
It's a really good question, actually. So this wasn't actually down to me. I didn't actually make this decision. Of course I picked the players, but in terms of the roles and stuff like that, Milsey was playing with the AWP for a bit in Enterprise, and I think he's a decent AWPer. But it was actually his decision that he wanted to go back to rifling, right? He was just 100% he wanted to go rifling. Poddy, from the get-go, from day one, even before he heard about Milsey, even before he knew he made the team, from day one said to me, I'm very, very ready as we speak with a rifle, but I really love AWPing and I'm really motivated to AWP. And I said, you know what, we've got AWPers in this process. You know, we had a tryout player called ENCE. He was insane and like very, very close to making the team. I hope he sees this as well, because he was honestly a really nice guy. And again, goes back to my point where I wish I could take more people. But yeah, we had AWPers obviously already in the tryouts who are experienced. Like I said, ENCE was one of them. And I said to Poddy, I very much doubt you'll be the AWPer if you did make this team, Poddy, because we've got, you know, experienced AWPers here and stuff like that. So, you know, he was fine with it. He said, you know, I'm ready with a rifle. I love rifling anyway. But he gave me that option, right? So when we got down to the crunch time and making the decision with the team, Milsey made it clear that he wanted to be a rifler, like 100%. He said he didn't mind picking up like a double AWP if needed. And we were stuck in a situation where it was like, I wanted to take a chance because I gave 2 tryout days to Poddy with the AWP right before I made this decision. And I said, you're AWPing today. So we didn't have no selected AWPer. We had Poddy and it was 4 other Finnish players. I think one of the tryout days was with the actual 5, but we didn't know it was going to be the 5 then, of course. Right. And then one day was with Poddy and many other people, because I wanted to see, because he fit best with this 5. So of course he's going to be comfortable. And then I put him in the deep end with a team that he wasn't as comfortable with. And in both of those days, man, he was so impressive. For a guy that hasn't AWPed in any official matches or to any degree of experience, he was very impressive. And I instantly saw those 2 days of, you know, 8 or 9 practices, whatever we played, tryout games, maybe even less than that. I knew right then that he's someone that I can work with and get him up to standards with AWPing, you know, and coaching him into that ability. And from there, that's when I kind of had one option to go with. Let's not pick an experienced AWPer and let's take a chance. And you know, like a Cinderella story with Poddy being a young player, let's pick him. He can be the star, you know, he can be the new star with the AWP, new role, no one knows about him. And yeah, just from those 2 tryout days, I was like, this guy can work with this AWP for sure. And then from there, of course, we spoke with the team and we said, is everyone happy with the roles? And because before we even finalized this decision, you need to speak to the team, right? To make sure they want to play. And everyone was happy. Everyone was like, this is perfect. And from there, yeah. Since then, again, going back to obviously the few practice days we had, Poddy is so determined to learn, right? Because he knows that, like, I've never seen a mindset like it. He knows he's good with the AWP, but he knows in the way of understanding how to AWP and positions and rotations and maps and where to play. He knows he's not up to standard, and he's doing everything he can to get up to standard without even me advising that. You know, he's doing it on his own accord, and that's the sort of player you want in the team, right? Of course, I'm there to help him, but he's doing it himself anyway, and that way you're only going to see him excel so much quicker. But yeah, it was a lot of people questioned it because, as you said, Milsey was obviously AWPer before, but it was just a case of Poddy opening up and saying, I'm happy to do this. After seeing him in those 2 tryout days, I was very impressed, and yeah, I could see it working.
That's awesome. So what are the expectations going into this season? I mean, how much time have you really had to practice as this like set 5 going into it? Yeah,
so expectations, again, we've made it very clear from the start, and I've made it clear that the results are important, of course, but for me, it's all about developing these players. If we can get from the start, the day we start with this 5 to up until whatever happens to the end day, we will say, if they've improved inside the server and outside the server, I'm very happy. I'm a happy coach, right? And hopefully ENCE would be happy as well, and I'm sure they would be. But in terms of results, I just want us to take every win or loss and take it where it's best. If we win, what can we do better? If we lose, why did we lose some rounds, or why did we lose overall? What do we need to do to improve? I want to just take every single result as a learning curve, win or lose. I just want to learn from that game. Of course, it would be nice to come in and win every game and look, you know, amazing, but I think if you come in with expectations like that with such a young roster, it's never the way to be. Of course, you want young players to have the mindset of let's win and let's try to win, of course. But if that mindset then overrules and then they start losing and they can't handle the fact that they're losing, the way that they're developing, the way they're focused on learning and developing goes out the window because they just want to win, right? So you need a balance of like competitiveness, and competitive mindset, and hunger to learn. And it's such a hard balance to have in a CS player, wherever you're from. But the more I can instruct that into the players, the more the results will come, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And you touched on it a bit earlier with the communication, with, speaking English and Finnish, and kind of wanting to, well, as you said, develop these players and ready them for a future, whether that be in ENCE or with another international team, perhaps. But what really is the purpose of this team? Is it really to develop players for the main team, right? And that's why you're readying them to speak English? Or is it really just preparing players, developing the Finnish scene?
Yeah, I think, again, a very good question. I think the purpose of this program, and it's the same with any academy program from any organization, I think it's the purpose of, rather than looking externally for a player, you're looking internal, right? It saves an organization a F load of money. I don't want to swear, but yeah, it saves an organization a lot of money. Of course, organizations will still look outside of the box, because if there's a perfect player out here, they're going to invest, right? But if they can save money and look internally into their academy program, Young Ninjas did it with LNZ, Linus. That worked out very well. Again, another great player. But yeah, back to my point is the fact of, if they can look internally rather than externally for a player, it saves an organization a lot of money. It builds a massive amount of content and story, that this player's came from an academy program all the way to the main team, and he's now the new star. That's obviously in the perfect world. And yeah, I think overall, in regards to everything else, I think the biggest thing for ENCE Academy, and after speaking to the owners and everyone that works under ENCE, I think, and the community, of course, learning more about the community, I think the biggest thing is they just want a Finnish team back. Like, they want the Finnish team to keep growing, right? And of course they support other teams, and if they support ENCE, they want ENCE to have the Finnish core, and then their main team's now gone international, who are doing fantastic, by the way. But I think they want that Finnish, that Finnish core and something to talk about, like they had before in the main team. And I think if they have that, the community is going to be so happy, because it's a Finnish team that they can follow, it's a Finnish team that they can support. And yeah, I think there's loads of factors to it. Of course, it's about the whole player situation with the internal-external thing and bringing them to the main team. It's the community aspect as well. And just overall, I think it's just about building stories for, players that came from nowhere to build them to something, building stars from nothing. And ENCE, of course, have done that in the past with many of their game titles and teams that they've had. And I think they just want to keep pushing that story with the academy team.
Right. Well, I think it's a great story to have. One final question, bring it closer to home now in the UK scene. So we've seen Volt now joining Fnatic Rising. I think that's really exciting. He's been an amazing player last season. I'm looking forward to seeing his growth this season. What do you think of the UK scene right now? There's a lot of up-and-coming players, right? Whether it be some of the guys on One Pin, maybe. But who really stands out to you? And do you think an academy is a good place for a UK player to go?
Yeah, I mean, do you know what, right? With the Endpoint Academy, I was trying to. We had mixed responses from, people thought it was bad. Some people thought it was good when we was doing the tryout process, and of course you're going to get that with any scene, wherever you're from. When we was doing the stage process and the initial tryouts and whatever, stage 1 up until, I can't remember what stage we had, 7 or 8 I think it was, we had people mocking it, and again, that's going to come from everywhere, but a lot of people supported it. But the real reason I started that academy program was I wanted to build the UK scene. That's why we got the integration of UKIC and made that into Endpoint's, run platform, where we could build build the UK scene from that. Of course, it's never going to be a perfect platform. There's always an argument and debate about that, but that's a story for another day. But yeah, overall, in terms of what I did there, I wanted to build the UK scene, because what's happening in these past 2 to 3 years is all of the peers and some of the best experienced UK players that have come out of this scene have gone. They've moved games, they've retired, they've gone and worked a 9 till 5, they've had family, they've had kids, or everything's gone crazy out of control. And some of these peers that even I looked up to when I was nothing in the UK scene have completely gone. And, you know, it's one of those things now where we lack leadership and someone that's going to teach these young aspiring players to be something. And of course, we still have some, like very few, but we have some that are trying. And yeah, overall, I think I wouldn't say it's in a bad place, the UK scene. I think, you know what, I think it's in the best place possible in terms of hungerness. There's so many young players, younger players who are willing to try and become an IGL. They're willing to try and build a team, get them teams into UK, you know, lands, get them into tournaments and online ladders and leagues, etc. And whereas before it wasn't really like that, you had teams folding left, right, and centre. And don't get me wrong, it probably still is happening, but there's a lot, from what I see on Twitter now, there's a lot more hungerness, you know, and that's what I like to see. And of course, I'm still trying to stay tuned in with the UK scene because I care about it most. I remember I remember that's the scene I came from, and it's still the scene I support and love every day. And I always keep an eye on it. You know, I've been watching One Pin a lot. Obviously, that Wilkes's one of my best friends, and Wolfie came from the academy team. But again, it comes with any team. You know, I like to support those UK teams for the same reasons, that we're all here to do the same thing and to grow and to make it. And yeah, overall, I think it's in a good place. We just lack leadership and finding peers to help out the scene. And obviously, with the experienced players moving on to do other things, it's hard to learn from people now, you know, and to find that inner sort of leadership levels from other people. Because whereas before, like if you look at the Danish scene, for example, sorry, I keep going on, but if you look at the Danish scene, for example, all of their past leaders and peers are still in and around the scene. If they haven't, if they're not an IGL, they've now become a coach. If they're not a coach, they're an analyst, right? So all of these young Danish players are all being brought up in if they make it that far, into a team with a peer that's got so much experience in building teams and building players, and they get molded into this, you know, ready player, you know. Whereas the UK, you have to learn it all by yourself. You'll be very lucky if you can find yourself someone experienced in the UK scene that can help you develop and help you mold into that ready sort of player. It's so hard to find that in UK because there's not many people, whereas other scenes there is. And I think that's been the biggest problem with the UK scene for a long time in terms of development. But obviously many other reasons which I won't get into, people's attitudes, stuff like that. That's like when I'm on the stream, you know. And you know, I'm not the perfect person. I had to learn in the UK scene. I'm still learning now, you know. I say this to a lot of people. Even when I used to stream with some of the UK people watching, some of them used to think I used to be on stream talking like I know it all. I don't, trust me. I learned in the UK scene just like these guys, and I care about them and I want them to learn as well. And I'm still learning every day, and it's just about finding that inner sort of hunger to learn and want to try and get somewhere. And if players get like that and they remove their toxic attitude and stuff like that and become a nicer person and want to help other people and support other teams, which is the key thing, by the way, support other UK teams. What's the point of bringing each other down? You're all in the same scene. You all want the same scene to have light on. You're not going to have light on it if you're arguing on Twitter about a game you just played against each other, you know? But yeah, that's, again, I'm getting into another rant about, you know, the UK. That's because I care about it. But in short, I think the UK scene's in a good place, especially for hungerness. And I just hope that people don't give up and keep trying. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been really insightful to get to pick your brain a little. And, well, best of luck going into the new season, man.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much for having me.
Hey there, my name is Frøg, and today I'm joined by the one and only Woomera, the Academy Program Lead over at ENCE. Woomera, how are you doing today?
All good. And thanks for asking, and thanks for having me here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm really excited to get to pick your brain on a few subjects and get your thoughts going into the new season. So to start things off, I kind of wanted to ask a bit about the trialing process on how you built this roster, right? I know that you guys had a partnership with ES Portal. Could you touch a little bit on that and how they helped you developing or scouting these players initially?
Yeah, when we initially started with the partnership with eSports, like the main thing was like they wanted to help us to create the best possible team, and to help the community and the ecosystem to have like a good academy team and academy program overall here at ENCE. So the first thing we talked about with them was like creating designated ladders and cups for players to attend here in Finland. So that is something we tackled that side of things, and like that was a great way to like easily scout players and check the data and watch the demos and stuff like that with eSportal. And for example, if I'm not mistaken, Podi, Multsi and Henu were on the first Prospect Academy Cup to win it all. And so basically 3 of our players in the team are from the first Academy Cup that we had with eSportal.
Well, and I asked this question to Whitey as well, but I wanted to ask you, did you feel at the start like there were some candidates that really stood out and you kind of had, okay, yeah, they're going to be on the final cut, or, you know, maybe the top 10 or something like that? Or did people really surprise you along the way as you trialed more players?
Both, basically. I don't think that no one stood out, but I think Podi was someone that I haven't heard that much as a player. So he was pointed out to me also from numerous directions, and including with the esports ladders and cups. And so Podi stood out for me from the players that I didn't know that well. And one who stood out during the tryouts was basically ENCE. He was on our long list, and we didn't check his matches and demos that much. And I asked George to like check certain players from the long list that I didn't know that well. So we already had tryouts running when we brought ENCE to the tryouts. So ENCE was the one that was basically outside of our radar also when we started the tryouts, but he stood out in the midway. So
I see. I also wanted to speak about the depth of the Finnish scene, because I've followed a lot of scenes over the years, and I feel like one thing that kind of stands out about Finland right now is that the players in the sub-top teams are kind of getting older, right? There's a lot of people in their mid to late 20s. Was it difficult finding these young talents to trial for the academy team?
To be honest, I don't want to sound arrogant, but like it wasn't that hard to find like good, especially mechanical talented players. There's so many mechanical talented players here in Finland. The thing is that what we also tried to cover with the tryout process was like me having an interviews with the players and asking them like self-reflection skills, possible sports background, interaction skills, goals and motivation. And that was something, and we wanted to like find 5 players that like have like very good work ethic. That is something that we also try to cover and have covered in the main roster. That like we need to have like 5 really good players who also have a good work ethic, and they do. And I'm proud to say that I think we also have that in academy now. So I don't think it was hard to find good players, but it was like it's always hard to find players that like have that comprehensive like capability to be a good player in game and outside of the game.
Yes, of course, and I think obviously that stood out on ENCE's main team right now. Obviously,
Yep.
I also wanted to speak kind of about the long-term goal for this team. Is it to develop players that can be promoted to the main roster with them, you know, speaking in English and stuff like that? Is it just to develop these players and potentially sell them to other clubs? Is it just the goal of developing and sustaining the Finnish scene? Kind of what's the long-term vision?
Well, you kind of hit all those main factors that we are trying to tackle here, but like all of them. Well, first of all, we want to develop like and have like good training program to help players both mentally and in-game wise, and of course help the community and the ecosystem to grow. But I think the end goal, of course, is to have the players to join our main roster. But to be realistic, there's like 5 spots on the main roster. So the thing is that we are more than happy to like develop players that will grow and also find another home from different organizations. That is something that we are more than happy to like do and develop players if we don't have a spot in our main roster. But that is something that we would like to in some point of our program. In my opinion, would be super like fantastic thing to have all those academy players, or at least few of them join the main roster.
Yeah, I imagine that would be the dream, you know, with beautiful stories like Bit, and even I suppose Monsi, although he was going over to another team, but beyond the point. What are your expectations going into this season? You know, there's not necessarily a lot of time left going into it. Has the team had enough time to practice? Do you feel confident that they'll place very highly, or is the pressure off going into it? You just want to see how the players develop?
I think the pressure is off at this point, and what our goals will be, like, we want to be competitive also outside of the Finland, and like have good international matches and be in good international tournaments and leagues and stuff like that, especially in WePlay, and we want to do well. And like you said, we haven't had much time to like prepare ourselves, but I'm quite confident because what I have seen in the practices and what I have talked with George and players, they are confident. So I'm also confident how we will do, but only time will tell.
Okay, well, perfect. Thank you very much. That's all the questions I had for you, and I'm really excited to see how the team does this season. It looks like a really promising young roster with a lot of good talents, and we'll see how it goes.
Yep, back at you. I'm also looking forward to see how boys will do.